God is good, and for each day that passes brings us a day closer to the launch of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. Today we are going to take a look at something we talk about all the time when it comes to Visionary Realms and their upcoming MMORPG Pantheon, and that is challenge. We all know that Visionary Realms is creating a social, engaging, immersive world that wants to challenge you, wants you to feel the sweet sigh of relief when you and your party overcome the challenges that await us. But today, I want to break down exactly what challenge in Pantheon means, and how Visionary Realms is pushing to make sure that it is real, that it is felt, but still keep the game fun, interesting, and make sure, of course, that you stay hooked for as long as possible. If you are new here, please consider subscribing and helping support this channel. And now for a word from our sponsors, the community. Before we begin, I want to give a big, major shout out to the members of Napalm. Thank you all so very much for your support. I could not do this without you. You are the sponsors of this channel. And if you would like to help support this channel, please click the join button down below for more information and a list of perks. And a very special thank you to the Lords of Napalm, Bounty Code, and Ray Cooper. Thank you for your highest tier membership. When you think of challenging MMO gameplay, many things might come to mind. Fighting raid bosses with your guild and learning the mechanics and getting the timing down just right is probably the most common challenge we have become accustomed to in MMORPG games, and is a reason most of us want to rush to get to that content, because working together and pushing yourself and your fellow players further and digging in deep into the unknown or places that fewer people have gone is exciting, and not to mention the rewards for conquering the harder content is usually pretty freaking rad. And these things will be in Pantheon. Visionary Realms wants that difficult mechanic-based raid gameplay for sure, but they also want your journey to get there to be just as meaningful, just as engaging, and just as thought-provoking, because in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the journey to the end is what they have been focusing on this entire development cycle. Brad McQuaid, who set this project in motion and laid out the key tenets, available to read on the website, follow the link in the description down below, envisioned this game to be a social, difficult, engaging MMO from beginning to end. But enough about that, let me explain some of the many ways Pantheon is pulling this off. First up is abilities, and I could go on and on about how the abilities all can be synergized with other classes and just how complicated and insane all of that really is. But I want to focus on the strategy of the abilities and spells in Pantheon because Visionary Realms has decided to go with the limited action set, allowing 8 key abilities or spells to be loaded out at once or memorized for your hotbar, with the addition of 6 more that act more as passive slots. The reasoning behind this is, as Joppa once said, to make the player think about what ability spells will be best for that particular group makeup, for these particular encounters that you are doing or about to do, and for this content in this specific place you are or are going. And once you get your hands on Pantheon and have to make this decision for yourself, it is very strategic indeed. Deciding what to pull out and put down for use is about as nerdy as it gets, and it's more fun in practice than it is in viewing. I need to explain a few things about combat in Pantheon to attempt to paint the picture for you. The combat isn't slow, but it isn't fast either. It's methodical and gives you just the right amount of time in the pacing to make decisions, but also fast enough that you could easily make the wrong decision and you and your group have to recover from that. Pantheon isn't the type of MMO where you smash everything that is not grayed out on cooldown. It is extremely strategic. And as I go through more of these other reasons Pantheon is difficult and challenging, this will become more clear. And also, by going the limited action set route, Pantheon has practically made itself immune to a very common MMO issue, ability bloat. Because even if you have 120 abilities and spells, you still have to choose what you want on your hotbar. This adds a challenge all of itself, as it will make different players play the same class differently depending on all the various situations they may be in, from group composition to the environment or mobs or skills of the players you are with. Of course, you can swap one ability for another between fights to adjust to the circumstances you are in, but while in combat you are stuck with the decision you made made prior. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. Next, I want to talk a little bit about dynamic NPCs and environments. So from the beginning, Pantheon has been working to make the world as dynamic as possible in a very natural kind of way. Now, first of all, NPCs can have different dispositions, so they can act differently depending on how they spawn. So every time you kill a mob, it could respawn with a different disposition, and that same NPC technically now behaves differently, calling for help or running away, or all kinds of different dispositions they could do. So this is what they call avoiding a Groundhog Day effect, so that even that same dungeon, if you're there for a long time, which in many cases you probably will be, you have to stay on your toes and pay attention and be vigilant. Now, another part of this is the environment itself, because Pantheon, although is going to have some PvP servers and rule sets, it is mainly being developed as a PvE type game. Now, most PvE games, the environment just means the mobs. There may be some interactable type things in the environment, and some MMOs have traps and things like that, and Pantheon is taking it even further. The content just isn't always the same, and it can change. Things like triggers and events that happen in the world. This helps with exploration as well, and making the world feel very different and varied at different points that you're playing, and also gives some excitement, but can also create a lot of challenge. One of the examples they gave that I really have always loved is this one. Say there is a hill giant camp in the world, and it is nasty. Either even a raid couldn't break into the camp, or perhaps there are no raids allowed there. But the storm giants come out of the heavens and attack the hill giants. What triggers this? It could be player driven, and could be obvious and simple, or very complex, requiring you to have a guildmate on the other side of the world who must ring an ancient bell that triggers earthquakes. Sometimes the hill giants are forced into disarray because of the earthquake. Their guards move inside the gates, the inhabitants are distracted and not watching as vigilantly for an attack. The earthquake happens while you and your friends are watching, hiding from a distance. Sure enough, a storm giant army dynamically spawns and heads towards the gates of the hill giant fortress. A huge battle breaks out. Giants of both variants are dying on all sides. What would have been impossibly normally moving around in this hill giant region is now possible. The hill giants mobs could change to as they react to the invasion. Certainly the storm giant mobs are interesting because they're not normally even spawned. Now, watching out for events like this and trying to take advantage of those, or just happen to be there when something like this breaks out, and that's just one example, by the way, of a dynamic event that could happen in Pantheon. And this would change your gameplay. This would change everything that was happening if you just happen to be there when this happened unknowingly. And there's going to be tons of triggers in the world, in dungeons, everywhere, where it just really messes up your day, and once again creates a very environment fight based on the environment that you actually land in. Now, also with that kind of dynamic kind of feel is the acclamation system, right? So a storm happens naturally in the world. This changes the way many classes will behave, because now if there is lightning, then your spells that use lightning now are more potent. If you're outside, as in if you go down into a deep dark cave, it doesn't matter what it's doing outside. And when you put all this together, this kind of dynamics really is going to increase the challenge, sometimes maybe giving you an advantage, but in many cases giving you a disadvantage and changing the way you have to behave in the environment that you're in. So the environment itself, on many different factors and many different layers, is definitely going to play into the challenge of Pantheon. Now, to get to a subject that I personally super enjoy, which is gear. Gear is very important in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. It can have stats, obviously, to upgrade you, procs, all the good stuff. But most MMOs, we get gear faster than GameGo releases crappy products, and are overloaded by it, and it becomes a whole lot less meaningful or exciting to get that juicy new drop. In Pantheon, Visionary Realms is carefully managing the RNG, you could say, for drops, where different drops happen at, to encourage you to go certain places to try for different possibilities of new gear, but also to make it meaningful. Getting a new piece of gear will be much more rare than in your typical modern MMO. What this creates is a great sense of accomplishment and excitement when you upgrade, and that this piece of gear will be with you for longer. But the gear excitement doesn't stop there. You will have situational gear that is better for, say, climbing, for example, or better versus hot, acclimated environments or creatures, and in some cases you may need certain gear in order to even go to some of the extreme places of Pantheon's world of Terminus. That is to say, if you don't have a potion or spell or ability or natural acclimation to that extreme environment. Now, of course, Pantheon's journey to level up is longer than most typical MMOs and more attuned to be like, say, WoW Classic. Although the speed is something they are testing right now and no one, even the developers, can put a figure on it yet, they don't want it to be too easy and too short, but they also want you to feel the progress even if your availability in hours per day isn't as high as it once was. There's also the time to kill to consider, and you have probably noticed that Pantheon's mobs take longer than your typical modern MMO to take down a mob. And this is intentional, as part of the strategic gameplay loop of combat. When mobs are all trash mobs, then the world just isn't dangerous or exciting, and entire public dungeons could be wiped out with little to no effort. Pantheon is going for a more EverQuest type approach for time to kill, and although it is still being fine-tuned, from my experiences, they're definitely hitting that sweet spot. Now, we can't hardly talk difficulty or challenge in Pantheon and not mention the death penalty. As you are aware, modern MMORPGs have moved away from penalties to death, and much to the dismay of players such as myself, when I don't mind to die and the only penalty is maybe a short jog or restarting an encounter, I simply just don't behave the same. I'm not as worried about it. It's no big deal, and the world feels more like my playground than it does something to contend with and fight. In Pantheon, they are looking at a corpse run type mechanic where you will need to return to your body in order to get everything you had in your inventory, including your coin. You will, however, keep your equipment you are wearing in order to make it more possible to get back to your corpse, but it will take a percentage loss in its durability, and you will also lose a percentage of your progress to the next level. Although at this point they're saying you cannot de-level. Also, this percentage loss is not based on the amount you have, but the amount required to get to the next level. Although this penalty could change and the percentages are still being tweaked, it is a definite penalty and will make myself and everyone else behave very differently in how we approach scenarios, as this is quite the hit, and make it very impactful and something we will all be doing our best to avoid. Although there is many other aspects I could go into, I think I've talked long enough and given you a very good overview of the challenge and how Visionary Realms is trying to manage that, and because of that challenge, it changes player behavior. It causes more socialization. It puts you in circumstances that are dynamic and evolving and something that is part of the environment and part of the gameplay loop. And quite frankly, it's probably the biggest draw for me to play Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, is that every time I log on, I have no idea what's going to happen to me, what's going to happen to my party. Even if we know exactly where we're going, we have no idea what adventures are going to await us on that play session. If you're not already a supporter of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, please go and pledge and get a package. I'll have the link to do that in the description down below, of course. And thank you for sitting through this entire video. And if you're not already subscribed, what are you doing? Click that subscribe button. And if you don't, then I will cry 10,000 million tears. I hope you enjoyed the video today. Don't forget to hit like and also to comment and give me some of that juicy, beautiful, delicious YouTube loot called the algorithm. And until next time, guys, God bless and happy gaming.